cmpradio.net. It's the station. cmpradio.net, the voice of Chester.
Hey everyone, welcome to What's News Delco. It's your host, Diamond, joined by co-host
Lee with the T.
Yes, so tonight we have a very interesting conversation. And before we introduce our guests, I do want to note that a trigger warning. Some topics that will be discussed can, bring up a lot of triggering emotions. And we just want to note that we will be covering things from a survivor's perspective, reentry perspective, and also holistic. But there are other factors that do come into that conversation that we do understand can cause, a lot of emotional mustering, I will just say. So just want to note that. We want to be respectful of those who are watching and also just those who are in the room tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest, Rasheeda Bagwell.
Hi.
From the Women's Guild Coordinating Program with the Mural Arts Philly. And we have Lenée A. Voss, who is a grief worker.
Good evening.
Yes. So
is my mic on? Okay. I couldn't hear myself.
So actually, I feel like this is only right to do before we dive into our specific topics, just to check in about where we are right now. I know personally this has been a heavy week for me. And we live in a society where, mental health isn't talked about the way that it should be, especially amongst Black communities. So I know I grew up in a very religious household, and if mental health was ever mentioned, pray about it, don't mention it ever again. So when you get into that habit, sometimes you forget that mental health is an important topic that should always be discussed. And people then begin to feel like it's not a normal thing just to talk about your feelings. So I do just want to check in just to see where we are before we dive into a deeper conversation, because I don't even want to make our guests uncomfortable. So anything I can start off. Like I said, it's been a very heavy week. Mother's Day weekend always, musters up some emotions for me, knowing that I had to bury my mother almost 2 years ago. So it's been rough, but now hearing the news of Mr. Khalif Ali, who was the founder of the Beloved Care Project, and his unexpected passing, knowing how we were very close, it made the week heavier. So I do feel like I'm glad that we are able to have this conversation in this space, especially with all of us being Black women. We are always told that we are the backbone for everyone else. We have to stay strong for everyone else, and we barely have that space for us to share and talk about where we're at and when we need support, because again, we're always expected to support everyone else, and we don't have the same opportunity to get that support when we're in need. So, yeah. Melita, do you want to share?
How am I doing this week? Not good. It has been a challenging week for sure. I had some family things happen early in the week that was very triggering for me. And then, of course, finding out that Mr. Khalif unfortunately passed away was, I think we were all in shock when we got the news. That was tough. And on top of that, I'm a single mom in the middle of, the end of my son's senior year and doing all the things. So dealing with teenagers is stressful too. But on top of that, I actually have a few mental health disorders. I have anxiety and depression, and then both CPTSD and PTSD. So CPTSD is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and it differs from traditional PTSD, which more people are familiar with, which a lot of people develop after a traumatic event like being assaulted or being in a car accident or serving in the military and experiencing war. Complex PTSD comes from experiencing situations repeatedly. So if you grew up in an abusive household, for example, and in my case, it was a lot of emotional and mental abuse from a parent and a sibling. So when you experience things prolonged over long periods of time, you develop PTSD as well. And you might be the type of person that certain tones that people use when they talk to you trigger you, or you can't tolerate being around people who are arguing because it triggers you and things like that. So it affects me in a lot of different ways. And unfortunately, at the beginning of the week, I was triggered from something occurring and had all the things happen, like beating myself up mentally, having a depressive episode. So it's been a rough week, but I made it. I made it out here tonight, which wasn't sure if that was going to happen. But yeah, it's a challenge.
Okay. I'll go next. Full disclosure, I live with bipolar disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and PTSD. Per my therapist notes, all three of these are in remission, but it's not like cancer where there's no sign of it. It's that when you have a mental health disorder, a mood disorder, personality disorder, anything under that umbrella, and it's in remission, that means that if certain symptoms spike, you are less likely to be in crisis when things are aggy, when things are rough. That being said, I'm navigating a depressive episode that I've been in for about almost 4 weeks now. Wait, what's today's date? No, 4 weeks. And it was, brought on by something that seemed very innocuous, but it brought up some deeper stuff. So I know people may not know what it is to be triggered, and it's not just like internet slang. It's a clinical term that has been adopted as part of a lot of people's vernacular, and it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It means that you are feeling something. So for anybody who wants to know more about how triggers work, look for a reliable source like psychologytoday.com. There are a lot of therapists, actual therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health professionals of varying kinds who make content on the internet. And so a lot of them have information that can help you around that. Another term you can use is activation, literally just activation, right? Like you pour the vinegar in the baking soda and it activates. Think about it like that. Just wanted to do that before I went all the way into my response, because I tend to get a little clinical. I've worked in clinical settings. I've been in therapy for most of the last 13 years. So my approach or my response may seem a little more formal than the way some people talk about their mental health, but I can do both. So if I get, too up in there, y'all slow me down. But I'm dealing with a series of grief anniversaries between December of 2021 and August of 2022. 7 people in my life passed away. Friends, acquaintances, family members, people who I've known since I was a kid. One person in particular, nobody expected him to go. He was on his way here for the Roots picnic, like he is every year. And like every year we text about it, and I tell him to have fun because I'm not going out there. Just like people that were part of my life for a long time, on top of just other things that I've been dealing with long COVID, experiencing emotional abuse in a past relationship, and having time to reflect on that while being quarantined. Like a lot of things have just shown up for me, especially in the last calendar year. So It's been a little struggly, but we'll talk later about holistic methods of taking care of ourselves. I want to shout out to me for knowing how to take care of myself, because
Yes.
you know, every now and again you got to hit that anxiety nap, that depression, that 45-minute depression nap, so you can get up and do what's next. The anxiety nap that comes upon you because you're so stressed out. You just kind of learning how to give in to what my body is telling me and really honoring it, right? Not just being like, oh, my body is worn out, but no, I need to stop. I need to lay down. I need to rest. I need to stay hydrated, or no junk food today, or monitor my sugar intake for a number of reasons. Just the little things that I've learned how to do have been incredibly helpful. And I feel like I'm talking so much. So, Rasheeda, take it
No,
away.
it's fine. It's fine. So, hi, everybody. For my check-in, I would say it's a little unbalanced. I had good days this week, and I had bad days. I had good moments. I had not so good moments. I was actually triggered this morning, like extremely bad. Like, my son is here with me, and he saw it. So that's something that bothers me, because I don't like getting out of character in front of my children, even though he's grown. That triggered me, because that's not who I want to be anymore. And I also suffer from chronic PTSD. My father was an addict, but I grew up in the house with him. So I have like attachment, abandonment, trust issues from that. And then I was married at 26 years old, and then I was in an abusive marriage for years and years and years and years. And then I was a corrections officer at Graterford, which was a level 5 maximum security men's prison. So I saw a lot. And then I became incarcerated, and I did time. So I have PTSD and anxiety from all of that. So I get triggered every day. It's not anything that I can do about it. Something is going to trigger me. It could be me using the bathroom, and somebody is at work and they're standing outside the stall waiting to go to the bathroom, and me just seeing feet, or somebody asking me, am I almost done? It takes me back to sharing 2 toilets with 31 other women on a pod. So that's a trigger. So it's like, I'll leave out my office completely happy, then walk back in from the bathroom irritated, and I can't explain to my coworkers every time, like, oh, I'm upset because somebody wanted to use the bathroom, because people don't get that. They don't understand it. Or I could be watching a movie or walking down the street and hear a voice, and it triggers something about my ex-husband, and then I go back to that time I got knocked around in my living room and my son was upstairs listening. So it's always something every day, so I have to find ways to push through it, because they're not going to go away. One of the things that bothers me is when people say, oh, give yourself time to heal. You never heal. There's no such thing as healing completely. It's like you break a bone and it mends, but when certain things happen to you as an adult, it doesn't heal. You just learn how to live with it and adjust to it and put your face on and get through it, because you got to get up and make the money. You got to take care of the kids. I'm a mom. I have 3 children. So my healing is like going to be forever. It's never going to be okay. I'm still grieving. My nephew was murdered August 24th, 2021. So we're coming up on that 2-year anniversary. His oldest daughter is going on her prom next Friday. I'm super excited about it, but I know it's going to be emotional for me because he's not there to celebrate it. So it's like, and on top of all of this, I have a full-time job. I have employees, participants, and I have to deal with their issues, help them through their problems. So my check-in is always really unbalanced. It really depends on, I joked earlier before we started and said, if you want to check in with me, you got to ask me before and after breakfast, before and after lunch, before and after dinner, and then once again before I close my eyes, because my mood could change at any time during the day. Foods trigger me. Smells. Like everything. So that's my check-in. I'm okay, but I'm not where I would like to be. I'm still working, but some days are better than others. So I haven't cried this week, so that's a plus. Now that I think about it, because if I get through a whole week, because it could be, it's usually the grief, it's usually that, it's usually that, and I think from losing so many people, and particularly this last one was very, 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 very hard on me. Really hard. I was actually in the hospital room minutes after my nephew passed. So I still smell his blood. I still see the tubes. I kissed him until he went cold. I held him. I know what that feels like for somebody's to feel the cold leave from somebody's body. So now if I have a disagreement with someone or my significant other, I blow things out of proportion. And I know I do, and it's not on purpose because I'm afraid of losing people now. Yeah. I think every time something happens, it's going to end in this person's not going to be around anymore. Yeah. And oh my God, what I said to them, because it's like I come across as having mood swings all the time. Like I curse you out and then 5 minutes later I'm texting like, hey, I just want to make sure you're okay. And it's like, what? Right. Because I'm afraid, because I've lost so many people, that's always in the back of my mind. Like, what if? When my son leaves out the house, I don't breathe the same until he comes back in. Because I'm like, what if? I live my life with what ifs. And, my religion teaches me that I'm not supposed to just let go and let it be, but that's hard when you've been experiencing trauma as far back as I can remember elementary school, and I'm 42 years old, and I can remember every traumatic incident that happened in my life from the time I would say 4 years old up until this morning. Yeah. So, say all that to say, my check-in is like, depends on when you ask me.
Right. But you're making it. I want to acknowledge that you are super aware of yourself. And I think the most important thing, whether you are in therapy or not, on meds or not, have a treatment plan or not, if you don't know yourself, you're not going to be able to manage any of it. So you're doing a good job being able to say, all right, ask me before and after breakfast. Ask me before and after lunch.
Right.
Like that is really, like that's really key. Like that's a really good practical way, right? Because people are like, oh, well, if you get a therapist, no. Everybody can't get a therapist. How do we do this like this, real time?
Yeah, that's something I'm actually nervous about. So I'm supposed to get back in therapy, and I have to, of course, you see the psychiatrist first. So I see the psychiatrist the end of this month, and all I'm thinking is like, please let this person not trigger me, because I've been triggered by therapy before. I had an amazing therapist. Like she was everything, and then she left to go to a private practice, and I couldn't afford where she was going, and she paired me with somebody that she thought would be good.
Right.
And it was horrible, and it made me stop altogether. And I stopped literally 4 weeks after losing my nephew, and that probably was the worst time to not have a therapist. So I haven't been in therapy in like 2 years, almost 2 years now. But a couple weeks ago, I woke up one day and my anxiety was on like 1,000, and I couldn't take it. It was President's Day, I remember, because I was home from work. I left my house and I had to go to talk to, I was telling them I need to talk today. And then they gave me an appointment for a therapist 60 days later, and I was like, wow.
Yeah, but it's so hard.
So I had to pull myself out of it.
It's so hard.
Trying to get an appointment somewhere right now is extremely difficult. I know several people that are on waiting lists, and they've been on waiting lists for 6 months. And then trying to find a mental health professional that you actually can connect with and feel safe with is extremely difficult as well. So I understand why you're feeling anxious about this upcoming appointment, especially because a lot of times we're dealing with people who don't look like us. If you're fortunate enough to find a provider that does look like you, great. But then you're also worried about, is this person going to be judging you? Is there any bias or racism that you're going to experience from this provider? It can be extremely difficult.
It's like getting in a new relationship.
It is. And so that's an important thing too, I think, when we talk about finding a therapist. So I've worked in and am currently doing admin work for a private therapy practice. And the therapy practice I'm currently working for does not take insurance at all. And the way that they're able to give people discounted or free therapy is by having as many full fee clients as possible. A lot of therapists, even if they are licensed clinical social workers, which means they have the credentials that allow them to bill insurance, it doesn't mean that they're going to take insurance, because insurance could be like, okay, we'll pay you $100 for every client on our plan that you see. But the amount of paperwork you have to do to get that $100 copay, or if it's only $60 or if it's only $75, you end up doing 9 hours of work because you're meeting with the client, you're talking with the client, you're taking notes, you're submitting notes, and then you're submitting claims. That's a lot of work for a $65. Some of them are as low as $60. And so what a lot of people are not doing anymore is taking insurance. And I want folks to know that that doesn't mean you can't find a therapist. It means that you just, unfortunately, you got to learn the game. Because healthcare in the U.S. is just like that, and mental health care is stigmatized even within larger healthcare. And Rasheeda, I want to encourage you to just be fully transparent with this person when you meet with them, and let them know. Like, come and bring to them, like, I've been harmed in certain ways by people in your profession. I am trusting that you and I can figure out something that works for me, even if we don't end up working together, because that's like a portal. Like, it's like an entry. You get your foot in the door. And if you're able to really work with them and they're able to meet you where you are, you stand a great chance of getting what you need, even if it's not with that practitioner.
Right.
Like, I feel very strongly that a lot of people don't have the resources they need for mental health because we just don't have everyday conversations about this stuff. We don't have everyday resources. Like the check-in we just had, there are people who probably have heard us do this and are like, wow, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know I could check in with myself. I didn't know I could check in with my friend, because it's such a foreign concept. And in the Black American community specifically, I can only speak for myself as a Black American. My folks are from the Carolinas. But the idea that your feelings are bothering you, that's the myth around mental illness. It's not just my feelings. My brain cannot process my emotional information without causing me distress in a certain way. That's not the same thing as my feelings are hurt or I'm sad or I'm annoyed, right? And then the way that those things show up in Black people and Black women especially, like there's a study that said we show up as irritable more likely than not as Black women when we're dealing with depression and anxiety. But I remember listening to it and I was like, but that's also because the lens is wrong. The lens is not for us, right? We understand that psychology, psychiatry, the medical field in America, all of that was built on the suffering of Black people and indigenous people. Like, we're clear about that. J. Marion Sims, the father of modern gynecology, did everything he did on enslaved Black women with no anesthesia. There were asylums and things like that where they would send Black people. There was a diagnosis called drapetomania, which literally meant the mania of somebody who wants to be free. Enslaved Black people were thought to be insane if they did not want to be in service. They were like, oh, dereliction of service is a mental illness. We know better now. And so with that in mind, we have to be careful in the field, but there's a lot we can gain from it. And I want folks to know that, like, you don't have to suffer through it. And advocating for yourself is hard, but you get to do that.
Right.
You get to do that.
So
and if they don't want to do it, tell them to put it in your shirt.
Yeah, that actually leads me to ask, because when you're saying that it's okay to service yourself, how do we encourage the younger community to do that? Because I know, coming from a survivor perspective from both abuse, and that was mainly from my father, and then also being a rape survivor, and then just dealing with grief after the loss of my mother. I was young when all of this happened. I was still in college. My mom passed away the week before my last semester of undergrad started. Then I had to bury her the second day of my undergrad semester. And then on top of that, 6 months prior, I was raped in a hotel. So that was a very hard year for me. And knowing that, like I said earlier, my household was always religious. And anytime I would go to like my dad about it, it would just result in some type of physical abuse, verbal abuse. You could have done something to prevent this. Right. Why do you walk out the house looking this way? Right. You know what you were asking for. Or even things like, I've even had him like physically choke me out at a church community event. And I'm just watching a congregation. They're just watching me and they're like, that's not my business. Yep. So that has allowed me to separate, of course, from religion eventually, because now I associate church with like, with harm. This is how like y'all operate, that this is not a space I want to be in. But at the same time, now that my mother is gone and he's the only one I have left, it's like, who do I actually go to? Because I do still consider myself young, but at the end of the day, I do have a twin brother, and we obviously had way different experiences. Right. I know my dad was much harder on him as a young man, but it's like, I don't want you to grow up to be this way either. And we've tried to have these conversations about mental health and how we're feeling, but it's not a simple conversation to have. And especially just trying to do research on who can actually service me or who can I talk to. I don't know anything about insurance. How do I actually go about seeking help? And I do know a lot of other folks who are under 21 who are experiencing similar issues, and they're just like, there's nowhere to go.
Out here.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just out here. So something I think is really important. If you have a library card, if you have an Audible account, if you have the Libby app on your phone or on your tablet, look for books. Start looking at books, like really audiobooks. There are people who do videos. Again, stick with people who are licensed. So you might have somebody who's an LPC, which is a licensed professional counselor. You may have somebody who's an LCSW, licensed clinical social worker, LSW. Somebody might, if there's letters after their name, find out what those letters mean, and see if that matches up with what you need. There's the Therapy for Black Girls podcast. Dr. Joy has a whole directory. There's a directory of people who work specifically around issues of fat phobia and fat folks not hating themselves for being fat, because that is a huge mental health issue for a lot of people. We don't have a social convention as Black people around eating disorders. Disordered eating is not just bulimia or anorexia. It could be orthorexia, meaning you limit your caloric intake and you make it a point to burn more calories in a day than you eat. That is not okay. I understand that people do that, but that does not mean it's okay, because at some point you're trying to control your body because there's somewhere else in your life where you feel you're out of control. So in terms of looking, and also I think the most important thing you can do is journal. Like, for real. Bust out that notes app in your phone. Have a notebook that you write in when you get up and before you go to sleep. Whatever your method is, create that consistency for yourself, because it gives you an opportunity to see yourself and get clear about certain things. And if you're in the early stages of a therapist search, what you must know first is what you can afford. Find out what your insurance will pay for. Find out if you have an out-of-pocket minimum. If you're not doing insurance, you have a lot more flexibility, actually, in my opinion, because there are a lot of folks who aren't taking insurance because like I said earlier, they end up doing 9-10 hours of work for $75, $100. And when we think about what it costs to go to school, to be that professional, to pay their rent for their office, to pay for their website, business cards, whatever have you, and then the student loans plus the regular cost of living, that $65, $75, $100 is not worth it in the long run. So you can find people. There's a directory called Open Path Therapy Collective. They are online exclusively, and then I think you pay like a membership fee one time of like maybe $50 or $60. And then you can access the whole directory. You can search by specialty, by geography, by race, gender, people who do work around, specific disorders. So like dissociative identity disorder, bipolar, narcissistic personality disorder, borderline, all of those things. And also I think also the most important thing about how we approach mental health as like lay people, as just people who have the mental health experiences and are not professionals, though we're experts on ourselves, right? We can be experts on ourselves. We can gain insight into one another. But the most important thing, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry. Okay. Had to rewind that real quick. Understand that your mental health is not separate from the rest of your health. It is all your brain, right? Your brain is in charge of everything. My brain tells me to blink when I don't know that I should be blinking. My brain tells me, oh, we feel something. It's time to sneeze. Everything that your body does for the most part, even like the fact that I move my hands when I talk, that's not something I'm thinking about doing. It's just something I do. My brain is in charge, right? But also my brain is connected to my body in other ways. So if I'm having a bad brain day, I may have a down body day. I may be tired. I may be sore. Or because I have a disability, and the physical manifestation might be sometimes that I don't move around as much as I want to or need to, and my brain will react accordingly. And then I'm in the bed longer than I plan to be, even if I'm not in pain anymore, even if I'm not fatigued anymore. So I think the most important thing we can do for ourselves as everyday folks is get clear about the fact that none of the things we experience can really function without a steady connection to our mental and emotional well-being.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, speaking of getting up and moving around,
Okay.
because some of us have injuries and aches and pains, we're going to take a quick 2-minute break so we can get up and stretch, because we are making sure we take care of ourselves.
That's right.
Today, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about some recent statistics when it comes to Black mental health, and we have some questions for both Lenée and
I can't
Rasheeda.
answer any more questions. I don't even know. I'm joking. I got as many answers as y'all want me to have.
All right, we'll stretch.
We off camera.
Have time. And we are back. So the most recent survey that I could find comes from 2018. So obviously this is pre-pandemic. Found that 4.8 million Black people in America reported having a mental illness, and 1.1 million of those people reported a serious mental illness in between 2017 and 2018. Since 2008, mental illness has risen among Black people of all ages. Black teenagers are more likely to attempt suicide than white teenagers, 9.8% versus 6.1% in white teens. Adult Black Americans are more likely to have feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and worthlessness than adult whites. And Black people living below poverty are twice as likely to report serious psychological distress than those living over 2 times the poverty level. So poverty definitely has a huge role that it plays when it comes to people suffering from mental illness, mental health disorders such as anxiety, depression, thoughts of self-harm. So when we talk about looking at things from a holistic standpoint, a lot of people, when they hear the word holistic, they automatically just think, oh, we're just talking about utilizing herbs and doing like yoga and meditation. But what looking at things from a holistic standpoint really means, and I learned this a few years ago in school pursuing integrative health, is that holistic means that you are looking at things from every angle. So not just the mental and emotional and the physical, but also different areas of your life, like how your finances plays a part in your overall health, your relationships with your family, your friends, your romantic partnerships, your career, all these things, how they work together and affect you good or bad. So when we talk about poverty and finances, it definitely, plays a role. Like, for example, when I'm struggling financially, I'm a single mom, right? I do not earn a living wage. I am definitely more stressed when money is tight. I'm prone to having more anxiety attacks. Right now, I'm trying to figure out how I'm paying for prom and all these things. Like, that creates more stress, which creates anxiety, can trigger my CPTSD, because then I have things playing in my head from things that someone said to me when I was 8 years old resurfacing. So just imagine how many people out here right now have been struggling since the pandemic hit, and if you were doing fine then, you might not be doing fine now. So there's definitely been an increase, although the research studies aren't complete. There's definitely been an increase in the Black community as far as mental health disorders go. People, unfortunately, coming to harming themselves, etc. since then. But on the flip side, there are also great holistic techniques that people can utilize day to day if they know about it or have access. So, Lenée, what are some things that you find that aren't, traditional, like taking medication or talking to a mental health professional, that you find that most people could maybe start incorporating easily to help their mental health?
First, I want to say that whatever I offer is not a replacement for actual medical advice. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse practitioner. I'm not any of these things. I'm just a bitch with mental illness. Okay. Pardon my French, and I've lived with symptoms since I was 7 or 8 years old, but I didn't get a diagnosis until I was 35 going on 36. So the treatment plan I'm on is relatively new, but what led me to get the diagnosis was the realization that I had premenstrual dysphoric disorder symptoms, PMDD, and I was on Lexapro for PMDD symptoms, and one day it just stopped working, and that led me to get a further diagnosis, and that's when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Putting that out there, because I don't want anybody to think that they can just do what I did, because they can't. Like, they're not in the same situation I am, but most importantly, I'm not telling y'all as advice. I'm sharing because it's what worked for me. So I do yoga. I meditate. I chant. I was raised in a holiness Pentecostal environment, but as I've gotten older, I didn't find God in church. I find God in my connections with other people, in nature. And in terms of my actual spirituality, I recognize that it's informed by different traditional religions and practices of West Africans who were stolen and brought here. So relying on the God of my understanding has been about really animating myself, like connecting with people, connecting with myself, being quiet, being meditative, sitting with my houseplants. I'm about to be a gardener of some kind, like really connecting with what's tangible, because mental illness, so many things get wrapped up in my mind. And so learning how to externalize those things. Going to karaoke when I lived in New York was really good for my mental health. The day that George Zimmerman was acquitted of murdering Trayvon Martin, me and two of my friends, we just went to a karaoke bar and we just sang for like 4 hours, because that was what we needed to do. Like, we can't be afraid to try something that quote unquote looks crazy. It's like, it could look crazy or you could be crazy. Which one would you rather? Would you rather have it all bottled up in your head, or would you rather get it out and get a clearer idea of what you can do with what you've expelled? Because some of it is a matter of you just being bound by the idea that you can't express yourself. So my self-expression, my creative practice, a few weeks ago was like, I'm going to do something creative every day. So one day it was coloring. One day it was painting. One day it was a cookie recipe I'd never tried. Another day it was, let me try this makeup look I saw on Pinterest, just to do something creative that was not about functioning and ways to make money to pay the bills. Or, you know, we have to encourage ourselves to play as grown folks. We don't get to play, but we really should. All humans should be able to play. When we think about, you know, I know there are some folks who think that humans are the greatest, you know, creation in the universe, and we're just better than everything else on earth. But lions play, tigers play, other animals play. We know that orcas play, dolphins play. It's all right. And I think for a lot of us, especially as Black folks, when we deal with poverty, instability, you know, it's not just the crack epidemic. Everybody got that one uncle or cousin that won't stop drinking, you know, and everybody's got that one relative who just stays away because they can't interact with everybody else without there being an argument. Those are people who are in pain. They're dealing with trauma. And so when we look at them, we might say, oh, I don't want to be like you. But you need to look at how they got there and think about what in your life is happening that could lead you there. I've done Codependence Anonymous, which is a 12-step program around unhealthy codependence. And I got a lot of information. I didn't keep up with the meetings, but the language, the conversation around that kind of healing process has been really helpful for me, especially at times when I wasn't in therapy. Another thing that I think is helpful for a lot of people, and this has been a lot of people in my life who I've shared it with, the Adult Children of Alcoholics and Other Dysfunctional Families Fellowship. They started with just adult children of alcoholics, right? But what they realized was that other dysfunctional family practices fit into what folks are dealing with when they come to ACA. So I get an email from them every day. There's daily meditation every day. Today was about my inner child and reparenting my inner child so that I'm not beating myself up and not being mad at myself if I relapse into a behavior that I know is harmful or unsafe, because there's a need that behavior met at some point for me. And if I return to it, it's because I'm looking for something. And instead of beating myself up, like, you know, I used to go to happy hour every day. Every day. My 20s, I had a drinking problem. And it wasn't until I was like 34, 35, 36 that I realized, wait a minute, you were drinking away your anxiety instead of dealing with it. And that's clarity I had because I sat with myself. I started journaling. I'm having conversations. And also a big part of my holistic care is building relationships with people who are on the same type time. Really important. It can be hard. It's taken me a very long time to find the friendships, the relationships that have been uplifted me in my healing and have upheld me in my healing, and people who I can uphold in theirs. But to be able to tell somebody I love very much, yeah, I think you should go into crisis care. I think you should check yourself into the psych hospital. Let me know how to support you. Not because I'm trying to punish them. Even though those environments can be punishing, I encourage my friend to go find what she was looking for and to get some help to start to get stable. That may not work for everybody, but the relationship we have enabled me to say that to her, and it enabled her to come out of the hospital and be supported and cared for the way she needed to. So that's my very long answer. Relationships, self-reflection, doing your own research. I do Reiki, I do yoga, I chant, I sing, and I do creative things. The most important thing you can do is be creative. Just be creative. It don't matter if it's good, just explore it, because that unlocks something for you. A lot of us are holding pain from childhood because there are certain childhood experiences that were damaged or taken from us. If not just somebody messing with it, they took it from you. Go back to that. Think about what you liked to do when you were 8 years old. Think about how much fun you had getting the big wooden spoon out the kitchen and singing along with whatever was on Friday night videos or Yo MTV Raps or what. I'm an old head, so I'm like, Yo MTV Raps, you know. Yeah. But if you get a Bluetooth karaoke mic, they're really fun. You should be around the house singing karaoke. It's fine. You in your house, or you do something fun, and let that guide you. Like, lean into the pleasure of having a good time and see where that leads you.
I like that. I actually want to direct a similar question over to you, Rasheeda, because now it has me just thinking about the whole reentry process. And especially for women, we talk about mainly it being Black men or just men of color who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated and what they need support-wise coming back into society. But then I feel like for women, it's a completely different narrative if there even are resources or programs out there. So I wanted to ask if you could speak on what that was like for you and how you now help women now with the Women Guilds program.
Okay, so I got out, I think it was either Tuesday or Wednesday morning. And the next day, I was up getting my daughters ready for school, getting uniforms ready, fixing their hair. So I didn't have a break. And what a lot of people doesn't realize is when a man comes home, he's either coming home to a wife, a baby mom, a grandmom, an aunt, a sister. Even if he's sleeping on somebody's couch, he had some form of support. I came back home in full mom mode. He was in his senior year, so it was prom, graduation. My oldest daughter was in kindergarten at the time, so she had a kindergarten graduation and class trip. My youngest daughter had move-up day coming up in her class trip. Mind you, I had no employment. So I came back home I still had to pay rent. I paid my rent from being incarcerated. Like, wow. I carried my household. It was my money. It was just somebody else was managing it. I carried my entire whole household. So I came home, I didn't have time to debrief from the situation that I was just in. So I'm like, yeah, I'm home. And I think I noticed my first night home, I knew something was off, but I ignored it. And I wound up ignoring it for 6 months. And I was like angry. I got in the shower with my bra and my panties on that first night. And when I realized, like, oh my God, you're home, like, I kind of laughed it off. But I was like, that's not good. You know what I mean? Because it's like nothing about your bathroom looks like in there. Yeah. But my brain was still very much there. Yeah. My body was free, but my brain was still very much incarcerated. So I walked around for 6 months like angry. I had to force myself to go to the supermarket, which I still have to sometimes because I don't like being in the supermarket anymore. I don't like people being around me. I don't like if your cart is too close to me. Why you standing behind me? I don't. Everything is a trigger. So I put myself in therapy, and my first therapist didn't look like me, and she was nice, but I was too much for her. I could tell. Like, I walked in, and at the time my son was about to be 18, so he was 17, and I think she was maybe like 20 something. And it was unbalanced. Not saying that I can't talk to somebody younger than me, but because she didn't come from the same background, she was Caucasian, I'm Black, she had no children, no nieces, no nephews. She didn't understand, she didn't even know anybody that had been in prison before. That plays a lot into being a therapist because it's not just about what you learn or read in a book or sit in a classroom and listen to a professor say. You have to have some level of life experience to be able to help someone that's going through some things. I don't expect you to be able to. I had a laundry list of issues, but she couldn't relate to anything. Dropped her, got a new therapist, and like I said, absolutely loved her. Black woman, even though she didn't have any children, she understood, and I never felt judged. Because I'm transparent. Like, I walked in like, I'm here, I'm angry, I'm upset, and I think I'm going to put my hands on somebody. I'm triggered, and I'm going to go back to prison. I need help. And then I started spewing everything, and this white girl was sitting there looking at me like I could tell she was afraid. Like, I think she thought I was going to snap on her because I would be in session and just be like, and the whole time it's helping me because I'm needing to get it out. But if I look across from you and I see you sitting there and you're like tense and squeezing your ass cheeks together because you feel like you think I'm about to jump on you, like this angry Black woman with the kimura on. So now I'm the angry Muslim Black woman with the felonies. You know what I mean? So it's like that was my moment when my first 6 months home, Dominic, because I didn't have any resources. There weren't any programs. So I decided that it was going to be completely different for any woman that was coming back out here after me. So I got tired of asking people to hire me.
Yeah.
I got tired of having doors closed in my face, so I started going around the back doors. They locked the back doors. I climbed in the window. They pulled the window down and locked it. I'm coming through your chimney.
Right.
You don't have a chimney, I'm in the vents. I decided I was going to get it one way or another. I went to go be a guest speaker one day, and I just never left. I volunteered for 6 months with no pay. And then I was offered the position to run the women's reentry program for Mural Arts.
That's so
and when they
awesome.
put me in that position, I tell people all the time, if you're put in a room, it's for a reason.
Yeah.
If an opportunity is presented to you, it's for a reason. Don't squander it. Like I said, I'm not going to let my past define me, but if I do, it's going to define me in a positive way. So I turn all of that negative into positive, and that's why I'm able to help the women that I do today. So a lot of them don't even know why they're angry, but I'm able to tell them this is what's going on. Look at this, look at that. Like you were saying, like you have to be self-aware before you can help anybody else.
Right.
So that therapy for me was like a pivotal moment in my life, because that was the first time in my life that I actually said out loud to anybody else that I'm not okay and I need help. Like I had said before, like I'm going through something, or I'm depressed. You know, the stuff that black people say. It's like, oh, I'm going through something, I'm depressed. When really I was walking around depressed for years.
Right. Right.
But I was getting up every day so it didn't look like it.
Right.
When you think of depression, people are like, not Rasheeda, she's so, and I get this all the time, but you're so strong. And sometimes
that's a trigger.
Makes like
A strong black woman.
yes, like okay, yes, I am, but I don't want to have to always be.
Okay.
You shouldn't have.
Like I shouldn't have to wear it. Oh, it's like clothes.
Yeah.
I should be able to take it off and put it down and pack it away sometimes. It should be like a coat.
Yep.
Do you wear a coat all year round?
No,
No,
you do
it's
not.
for the winter. So I don't want to be strong 365.
I know that's right.
Like, so that's what the reentry portion of it looked like for me. It was very hard. I do pat myself on the back because I took myself out of that dark place that I was in. I said, something is not right.
Right.
Something is going on. I don't like how I feel. I need to go talk to somebody. And then I had a million things like come up in between there. But I had to deal with it. I went through a divorce that I was extremely happy about, but I had to like trick him. And so I had to pretend to like him and like be his friend to get him to sign the divorce papers.
Right.
And he's the person that tried to kill me. You tried to take my life. You held me hostage.
Right.
While I had my breastfeeding daughter in a pizza store for 4.5 hours.
Right.
You came after me. You tried to kick my mother's door and you broke all my sister's windows out when I left you. Like, you did all of these things. And then, so that was hard for me too, because it's like, but I said, my stubbornness is not going to kill him. It's only going to mess with me. So I became, when I say I'm so self-aware now, almost in anything that anybody says to me, you can't bother me with your words, because I already had those hard conversations with myself. So that's what I teach the women in my cohorts. I deal with men too, and I tell them the same thing, but women in particular, I'm very hard on them because the world is harder.
Yeah.
So I tell them all the time, you have to have those hard conversations with yourself. Like literally look in the mirror and talk to you.
Yourself,
Tell you everything that you need to do for you. It doesn't matter what he said or she said. What do you think? Because you can't lie to yourself. So that's what the reentry portion of it looked like for me. It was struggle. It was hard. But every day that I wake up and those women come in there and they're asking me for help and asking my opinion, I know that I'm doing something right, and I know that a lot of what I went through happened because I may be saving somebody's life, but they save my life every day too, and they don't even realize it. It's days I don't want to get up out the bed. But outside of my children, my household, they need me.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, I am strong, so I'm carrying them on my back.
Yeah.
So that's what the reentry
That's
portion
wonderful.
of it was.
I want to say, I want to make sure you hear me say, that's really
Thank
great.
you.
That's really great, Rasheeda. I love that. I want to come visit y'all. I'm going to come visit y'all.
Absolutely. We're going to exchange information after we leave. You can come visit.
Yeah, I do want to say that it's so hard to continue to tell ourselves that we have to be a certain way just to continue on as a person, or just having to help others because you feel that weight is now your responsibility. I have this position, I have this career, I have this job, I have to service them. But But Lenée and Rasheeda, like you all were saying, like you have to be self-aware. And that's a process in itself, because a lot of people aren't going to accept the fact that they have issues, they have problems, they need help.
Yep.
And a lot of times people suppress that because they don't even think about what support is even out there, because sometimes there's little to none.
Yep.
So it can be really hard. So I really just want to acknowledge the fact that all of y'all are dope-ass Black women. I am so very proud of all of you. I am happy to be connected with y'all. And the fact that we can just sit here and have this conversation and say, look, I know there's some shit going on with me.
Right.
But I can openly admit that. And at the same time, I can tell that to others when I go to support them in something and not just give them a fake persona like,
That's right.
I'm that happy Black girl with no issues, no anger, no depression, no nothing. No, I go through it too. Life be lifing. We all go through it. So I do just want to acknowledge y'all for that, because it takes a lot. It
I got
truly
more
takes a lot.
issues than Essence, Ebony, Vogue, and Jet all put together. Like, I'll tell people, I sometimes I lead with it when I first meet somebody. Like, not lead with it, but that first conversation, listen, I was in prison. This is what I got going on. And I'm running it down. Sometimes it's too much for people, but that's why in that very moment I know, okay, I'm too much for you.
Right.
Because I'm at the point where I don't have time, like you said, Diamond, to pretend. I'm not, because I can give you, you might meet me on one of my good days.
Right.
But if we're having a conversation, in that initial conversation, something about my past is going to come up, because I feel like I have to disclose it. Because the minute that I'm having a bad day, I don't want you to say, oh, I didn't know. Like, I'm letting you know this is what's going on with me. Like, I have one friend that doesn't get it. Love her to death, but she doesn't understand it. And I know she doesn't, because I go missing sometimes. And it's not anything personal. And it's like, yes, you see, I'm posting on social media. Absolutely. That's work. That's business. I'm building a brand. I have to do that. I'm a public figure. I have to do that. Or it may be, we'll talk, and it's like, I'll bring up something like, oh, I was talking to such and such. Oh, you wasn't calling me. And it comes off as rude, but it's like, in that moment, when I was going through that for that 6 weeks, you weren't the person that I needed to talk to.
Right.
Because you couldn't do anything for me, because first of all, you have 6,000 things going on.
Right.
And I gotta pick and choose what I can deal with. If I call you to decompress and you have 75 things going on in your brain right now, I'm gonna pick me. I'm always gonna choose me.
Every time.
So I prioritize. I have time for work. I have time for my household. I have time for my children. I have time for whoever I may be dealing with in the moment, because that could change, but I can't deal with everybody. Everybody can't accept that. So I just want people to also know, when you become self-aware, you start losing people too.
Sure do.
Child.
Because it's like, now I know me better, and you don't want to accept who I am. You want me to stay how I was for you.
Yeah.
Listen, I've definitely, Lenée can tell you since the last,
I've been telling Maleata for 2 years, I'm like, you about to not be friends with this person. She's like, that's not true. 3 weeks later.
Lenée
right
and
on.
I have been friends for almost 3 years
about 3
now,
years,
since the pandemic hit.
It'll be 3 years in June.
I
next
met her.
month.
She took a Reiki class with me. That's how we met. But I'm very grateful that we did meet, because I have learned a lot from her as far as making sure I prioritize myself. And what did you do for yourself? Like, she will ask, she's like, Maleata, what have you done for yourself today? But that's a check for me, like, because, being a mom, and I'm homeschool mom, and I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm out in these streets raising hell with Diamond and being an activist. Like, there's a lot that I do, and I often do neglect myself. And then, of course, then my mental health starts suffering. But also, as I'm on my healing journey, which is a lifelong journey, reevaluating who is close to me. Like, if I have friends, I have a couple of friends, they're chaos. And it came to a point where, like, they're chaos, and they were projecting it onto me. And then I was in a depressive episode, and because I had a major life change, and then they started projecting their stuff onto me, and then it made it worse. And I'm just like, wait. Right, this is not what friends do to friends. This is very selfish. I'm telling you, if I literally can't get out of the bed right now.
Right.
to take care of myself. Thank God my kids are in their late teens. How the hell am I supposed to do something for you? And how dare you ask me knowing how I am right now? So looking at your friends, reevaluating, if not totally, severing ties with people, putting them in a certain box, like, okay, like I know, like when I'm up and I just want to hang out and have fun, this is who I'm talking to. But the people that are your inner circle, that are going to be in the thick of things with you, that are your support system, that remind you to take care of yourself, also set healthy boundaries with you, like she'll let you know, like, I'm at capacity, I don't have the capacity to talk. Like, is this a 5-minute phone call, or you need somebody to like listen to you? Because if you need that, it ain't me today, right? And I respect those boundaries, but it also helped me learn how to set those boundaries with other people. And it's hard, especially like friendship breakups are sometimes worse than breaking up with a romantic partner, because that's your friend. They're supposed to be there for you regardless. But when you're trying to prioritize your mental health, sometimes you got to get rid of them people that aren't helping.
Right. I'm glad you said that, Maleata. I just wanted to jump in because, what's funny is it's harder, but it's easier for me.
Yes.
And somebody told me that was crazy to me. Somebody actually asked me a question. They said, because they'll ask me, like, what's going on with such and such? Oh, I don't talk to her no more.
Period.
And they'll be sitting there looking at me, well, didn't y'all know each other for such a... Yes, I did know her for 25 years, and we don't talk anymore.
That's what I
Moving
said.
on.
Right.
But they'll be like, well, are you like that with your male partners? Absolutely not. Because like you just said, girlfriends are held to a different standard. Yeah. You just supposed to know better. You're just supposed to know better. And I'm not making any apologies about like, I'm at that point where if you cross me and I feel like you're not there for me or you expect too much of me, I'm done with you. We don't have to argue. We don't have to fight. We don't have to have a conversation about it. I don't have to block you on social media. Your contact can stay on my phone. I don't care. You can call me. I won't answer. You text. I won't respond. You like a picture or I see you lurking in my stories and it's like, I don't care. But a lot of people get so like, well, I don't understand, and why you like this, and why you not doing that. I'm cool. I'm done. It's 2 friends that I have that were there for me. When I left my ex-husband, my son can tell you, I was able to get his uniforms, a couple pairs of jeans, my baby's clothes. I left with one overgarment, the jeans and the shirt, one that I had under it. I left my car. I left my house. I left my appliances. I left everything. I had some food stamps and like $180 in cash, and that was all I had. And it was 2 friends. They almost was like not real life fighting, but about to like argue about who me and my kids were going to stay with. When I say they put themselves in kind of uncomfortable situations to make sure me and my kids were okay. Right. And guess what? Those are the 2 people. They've never asked me for anything, but they can have anything from me. Right. Same 2 people. When I went to prison, helped me carry my household as if I was there. My presence was missing, but they made sure things went on. Those are the 2 people I don't even talk to as much, and that's the craziest. We don't have to talk every day. We can go weeks and not talk and just do text check-ins, but we're okay. That's maturity to me. But the ones that I was with every day, the ones that knew me, and I thought that I knew them, and I would do anything for them. And I mean, I'm paying for prom outfits and people holding my car, and I'm paying for medication that your insurance won't cover. I mean, because when I was in my illegal activity, everybody was okay with what I was doing because I benefited you. Right. But I've been home. December will be 5 years that I've been home. And I have one friend that I was friends with over 20-something years, and she's still on her way to my house to come see my youngest kids. So it must be a lot of traffic. Right. We both live in North Philly, but it's funny to me because she wrote me a letter 2 months before I got out and said, I'm going to go see the kids this week. I've been home almost 5 years. Yeah. But guess what? I still let her follow me on social media because I want you to see that ain't about nothing. You showed me where I stand with you, and I decided not to stay there. Right. Like, so I make no apologies about cutting friends off. Yeah. Because if I have to cut you off, you were never a friend. If I have to question it, people are supposed to go through things in relationships. Man, woman, 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 man, man, whatever your choice is. When you're in an intimate relationship, intimacy changes things, so you're expected to go through certain things
Yes.
because you're having sex with that person, you're kissing that person, you're sharing intimate moments. So you're going to go through stuff because the chemistry is different. You're not supposed to fight and go through things and there's loyalty with your friends. So the minute it happens, I'm cool on you.
That's real.
And there's some people that's probably going to hear this. She's talking about me. Yeah,
Maybe.
I
If
am.
the shoe fits.
If the shoe fits,
Yeah,
look.
I am.
And I think also, so Rasheeda, I know you and I are in our 40s. So I think it's also a part of just the longer you live, the less capacity you have for certain things. Because you get sick of your own bullshit after a while. Like, I ain't going to hold you. I'm like, Lenée, you could have made lunch today. She went out and you had lunch. I mean, it wasn't no crazy expensive, whatever. But I'm like, all right, we cooking tomorrow. We in the house. We cooking tomorrow. You know, just little things that bring me back to the things that I say I want to do and be. And I think when we have relationships, so one of my grief workshops is around friend breakups specifically, because we don't have social standards. Like, we have people will sing all day and all night about my dog left me, my wife left me, my truck broke down. You know, like, we'll have music about grief, but it's around death or around a romantic partner being lost. We don't have social standards around how to deal with friend breakups. So when you let go, and like, I think there's different kinds of letting go. Like, there's the firm boundary, like you tell the person explicitly, I'm not messing with you no more. And here's why. You just stop responding, or you just let them kind of drift. You let them fade off into the sunset, and it doesn't have to be any love lost, because sometimes it's just temporary. Sometimes it's just temporary. Sometimes you're on that parallel path. Sometimes you're on the same road together. And then sometimes, you know, somebody's off to the right, you're off to the left, and maybe you cross paths again, maybe you don't. But if your mental health is being taxed, it's okay to take a step back and to evaluate what it is you can and cannot tolerate. There's nothing wrong with that. Same thing with a romantic relationship, especially if there's any kind of abuse going on. So it's not a common discussion to have, but coercive control is a specific kind of emotional abuse that includes financial abuse. I'm talking about, I have a friend right now who's in a coercive control relationship. Their partner refuses to get a job. And then when they get a job, they sabotage it so they can't keep it, so that it's on my friend to do all the work.
I've been there.
And I've been there as well. and it's very easy to pass off on certain industries. Like, if you're a brick and mortar retail kind of person, after a certain point you couldn't get a job, right? And post-COVID, you definitely are going to struggle with retail jobs that pay a living wage. But having this person blame their industry of choice instead of taking the time to find something else to do, somebody who maybe tells you, oh, well, we have to have all the same friends on social media. That's coercive control. That is coercive control. So, like, there are little insidious things like that show up as PTSD long term. And what I've learned the hard way is, just because I understand why you act like that doesn't mean I gotta let you act like that. Because that has an impact on my mental health, but that's also an outgrowth of my mental health. Because if I am in a depressive episode, I'm gonna have a harder time standing up for myself. And there are people who know that. There are people who will take full advantage of that. There are people who will look you in your face like, oh, did you take your meds today? First of all, don't do that. Don't ever do that to anybody unless this is a wellness check. A wellness check. Did you take your morning meds? Did you take your night meds? Have you eaten today? Like, that's when you ask that question, not to make somebody feel crazy or look bad, because what ends up happening then in that manipulation is they begin to not trust themselves. And if you can sow those seeds of mistrust in somebody's mind about themselves, you can do whatever you want to them. That's how abuse thrives. That's how people end up as enablers of abuse, and might not even realize that they've been enabling abuse because they've been manipulated also. And so, like, a big part of what I'm hearing when I heard you talk about, you know, that friend who's still on the way to your house, they stated that intention, and maybe they overstated what they were capable of for whatever reason. But it's no love lost. If they ever show up, they show up, and if they don't, they don't. And there's just a level of peace you have that I've learned to really embrace and seek in my 40s when it comes to interpersonal relationships, that it just was not there for me in my 20s or my 30s. And I want everybody to know that you can start that journey anytime you want, but you hit about 41, 42, that fuck it level just is up here. Like my don't care is pretty high. Like I am deeply committed to people and work and community, but also I don't care.
And my curve game is on Lincoln Drive.
Okay. All right.
Right on past you. Okay. So, well, why? Because I've had a couple of those relationships in, like, girlfriends, and I'm talking about, like, long term. And I feel like one or two in particular are really bothered by it. And it's like, you did what you did. It made me feel the way that I felt. And you didn't take the time to think about what I was going through when you know what I've been through. Right. So you know what? No need to talk about it. No need to argue. I'm just done. Right. And I'm not mad, though. Right. I'm not mad that we're done. Right. It's cool. I outgrew you, like you said. It's just like, you could be like a pair of jeans. Maybe you fit for 20 years. And then I got a little bit more curves now, so you don't go all the way up for me. Yeah. And that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, it's like if you grow out of your Old Navy jeans, you go back to Old Navy and you get another pair you decide you're going to get. Or maybe you go to Lucky Brand. It's just, it's okay, but you're not mad at the whole Old Navy corporation because you grew out of that size jeans. Like, people are really mad. They don't understand. I'm getting like, I'm hearing, oh, she thinks she's better because she doing all this stuff now. Yeah, I do think I'm better. I'm better than the person I used to be. I'm better than the person that you wanted me to stay because that was comfortable for you. You liked hearing me complain. You liked it when I had all the gossip. Now, I only want to talk about business. Right. Like, yeah, every now and then we're going to gossip and it's going to be like, girl, did you hear? But overall, I want to talk money. I don't care that your boyfriend still didn't commit to you and y'all been on and off for 15 years. I really don't care anymore. And the relationships that I have now are so like, people are like, oh my God, that's what you're doing. I'm like, yep, you know why? Because that's what I want to do. And I'm not making apologies to anybody. I'm doing me. Because like you said, my fucking level is, oh my God.
It's real high.
I turned 42 in April and I think I hit that peak at like 41. I don't care.
It's really hard to care.
I can't wait for y'all to get there.
No, for real.
You feel it. No, you feel it.
You should. It is a physical shift.
No, not saying I don't still go through stuff, but when I tell you, change. Like, I can honestly say that when I was in my 20s and my 30s, I would go through something with somebody or a relationship or whatever and be in it for weeks and months. Now, you got about a 2-week window before I don't give a fuck no more.
I agree.
I don't care.
I'm trying to get there.
Like, I don't care. And not saying it still won't bother me a little, but it's to the point where I'm like,
I can't engage with it too much.
Yeah, like, I'm not about to be laying in the bed. Like, I get depressed about long stuff that happened to me before. I got to deal with that. So you think I'm about to be depressed about the fact that
I don't have
you're
room.
not talking to me no more or you're mad?
I don't have room.
I don't have room for that.
Yeah.
So like, it bothers me for like 5 minutes, but then.
Yeah. And that's a natural, and that's a healthy way of coping with things that cause you distress, right? Like, you have somebody playing in your face. Like, perfect example. I had somebody playing in my face about whether or not they wanted to spend time with me in a certain way. And I was just like, okay, well, while you're deciding, guess what? I'll be over here tending to my internal and external gardens, okay? I have like 20 houseplants. I got shit to do, okay? Mm-hmm. I have a niece, I have a nephew, I have community members, family, friends. I have a life. I have a book I want to write. I got music I want to write. There's things to do. There's a whole garden of me to tend to. And I think tied into your conversation about reentry, right? And the experiences we have as Black people, the experiences we have as poor people, as women, as whatever your marginalization is or isn't, we live in a society that tells us that if we do not have a 9-to-5 job, then we are worthless. And if you can't get the 9-to-5 job, you're being told that you're worthless by default. So what are you supposed to do? You may or may not be in illegal activity. Everybody's not gonna busk on the subway and then get discovered and get rich. Like, everybody's not gonna come up with a miracle cookie recipe and then make millions of dollars. Like, those things happen less and less And it's by design. It's by the same design that has you incarcerated, that also has you in a position where you were doing the things to get incarcerated. The same system that made it so that you had to sidle up to your abusive ex to get him to sign divorce papers. Like, that's madness. You should have been able to walk away. But because it's designed a certain way, we have things that we come into the situation with. And then also, if people are familiar with the concept of epigenetic trauma, so the trauma, whatever stress my mom went through when she was pregnant with me, that impacted every egg in my ovaries as I was gestating in utero. Everything my grandmother dealt with when she was pregnant with my mom, my mother absorbed that. But my mother's eggs, one of which was me, and that also impacted me. So we have that. And where there's epigenetic trauma, there's also epigenetic joy, of course. And like, there's certain gestures or sayings or the way you laugh that comes from people that you may never have met, right? But when we look at that and it's combined with the settler capitalism that we live in the state, we've lived in a police state for a minute now, but like living through summer 2020, that was something I had never dealt with before in my home. I used to live on 50th in Baltimore. There were tanks coming down 52nd Street, and I could hear them. My neighbors, my friends being shot with non-lethal rounds, getting chased, all those things. Those were things that I absorbed into my body and my mind and my heart. And so when things died down, that was when I started losing more friends, because I had to get clear about what that had done to my mental health, what that had done to my emotional well-being. After I had processed a number of medical traumas like the year before, about a year and a half before that. So I was in the house anyway because I was sick. But then realizing that people were not capable of meeting me where I was and respecting that I had limits on my body and on my mind. That's a really big part of it. Like the letting go of things that aren't working for you. And I don't mean to say it in that cliche, like Instagram caption, if it doesn't serve you, it has to go. Because service is a transaction, but what feeds you and what are you feeding? What nurtures you, what are you nurturing? If I have a garden, what am I growing in my garden? Food, flowers, herbs, medicine, right? So I take care of the mint takes care of me. I take care of the marshmallow or the lemon balm or the passion flower. And those are things I can harvest to take care of myself. If I grow tomatoes, I know I'm gonna have me a bomb tomato salad. Like, you put the work into the garden to get something out of it. And if we look at our lives as a garden, I think it's a lot easier to approach our mental health, because gardens also have cycles. And that gives us an opportunity to be more gracious to ourselves and others when we're having mental health struggles, when we're having a rough time. People have trauma anniversaries, or there may be a thing that reminds you of a trauma that you didn't even realize was connected to that trauma. If you are looking at yourself as a garden and not a paper mill, like a conveyor belt, right? Like, you're not a machine, you're a person, you're a living thing. Gardens are living things. And I think if we take the best care of ourselves as gardens, if we really envision ourselves, like if you write down on a piece of paper, somebody's listening to this right now, write this down. Right at the top, your name, and you write the garden, right? Rasheeda's garden, Maleata's garden, Diamond's garden, Lené's garden. What's in your garden? Who's in your garden? There are animals that visit gardens. That's a whole ecosystem. What's your ecosystem look like? Because there's people out here that would not be able to do that if you paid them to articulate, to draw, to plan out the life that they have and the connections they make. And those are often the same people who can't wait to, I'm going to say it, mess up somebody else's relationships and life because they don't have any of their own. That insecurity, and it's valid. It's a valid insecurity. It can feel really messed up to see somebody doing all these things that you think you're not capable of or aren't allowed to have. But people who come and mess with your stuff are people you can't be, you're not welcome in the garden. You can smell the flowers, but don't pick them, Or the mango's not ripe yet. Leave my tree alone. It's okay. And that's the boundary. And that's why I like that she said, you want me to be mad that you're gone, but it's not. It's a trauma response. It's also a grief response. Oh, loss. Okay, well, loss is normal. Like we live to die. Like the two things that are guaranteed, you're gonna come and you're gonna leave. Everything else in the middle is variable.
You brought up two different things that really just stuck out to me. One, trauma anniversaries. So a lot of times, I actually have a big trauma anniversary coming up at the end of this month. So the end of May for the last now almost 7 years has been really weird for me. I was in a relationship with someone I'd known since I was 13 years old, always been best friends. And one day, I don't know, he snapped and I was raped and I was nearly strangled to death. And now every year, that day comes around the end of May. And last year, I didn't even realize what day it was. But all of a sudden, I was sick. I couldn't get out of bed, called off of work. I didn't know what was wrong. And I happened to look at my phone and look at the day. And I'm like, oh. So now I know this day every year I probably should plan to do nothing. Because even if we're not consciously thinking of something, our body stores trauma, and our body and our subconscious remembers trauma anniversaries.
Absolutely.
So just that's something mindful, something for people to keep in mind if you are dealing with trauma, and then you start to notice that you feel ill around certain times. The fall is also heavy for me because that's when my mom passed away, and also the same time I was getting a protection order against this person, and going through the court system and all those things being finalized, which was extremely traumatic. And then also the epigenetic piece. The majority of us that are living today, if we go back 7 generations, someone in our family, an ancestor with direct connection to us, was enslaved.
Right.
Absolutely.
And we all are still carrying around that trauma as well.
Yep.
So those two things tied with like the issues with my mother, I'm actually going to be relaunching my Lead the Trauma with Your Mama workshop this summer, which I created in 2020, right before the pandemic hit, because I was healing from the emotional and mental abuse that I suffered from my mom. Still healing from that and unpacking all those things, and which is very complicated, to say the least. But I had kind of started posting online about my experiences just as a part of my healing journey, because I literally woke up one day and was just like, you can't keep this in anymore.
Yeah.
Like the weight of it was so heavy. Like I literally woke up out of my sleep one night and was like, you can't hold this in, not a day longer. Like you are going to just lose yourself in it. I posted a comment about, I was about 7 years old when I realized my mom didn't really like me, and immediately was attacked by her best friends. It was bad. But I created this workshop because we often talk about absent fathers.
Right.
We call them deadbeat dads, daddy issues, things like that. But in the Black community, God forbid you say something that isn't positive about your mom. Everybody's clutching their pearls like, oh my God, but that's your mother.
Even if she burns your house down and everybody witnesses it, somehow you're supposed to give thanks because your mom did that to you.
But
not a stranger. Your mom burned your house down.
in my experience, and I have daddy issues too, because my biological father wasn't around, the dad that stepped up to the plate, we have issues. But a toxic mother, I feel like is more harmful than an absent father, because this is the person that you are
They're
living
toxic
with,
and present.
and you're hearing things come out of their mouths day in and day out. And for me, it was so bad that now I'm walking around as an adult with PTSD, and it affects my relationships with other people, with my children, and I'm very like over analytical and cautious of myself as a mother as a result, because I don't want to do what my mom did to me. But I created the workshop, Lead the Trauma with Your Mama, to talk about that, have the open conversation in the Black community, because a lot of us are walking around with mommy issues. We just can't, or we're afraid to say something about it, because if you do, it's like you get crucified for it.
Yes.
So I'm relaunching the workshop to have the conversation, to help people to begin their own healing journeys, to bring light to the topic, because we don't want to talk about it, and we need to talk about it, because a lot of us are suffering as adults because of what we dealt with from mothers or mother figures in our lives. So we'll be relaunching that, so I'll be announcing the details. And like Lenée said, if your mother experienced trauma, which my mom did, she never healed from that. What happens when we don't heal from our trauma, we just pass that on to the next generation. So addressing your mental health healing from your traumas is super important, just so that we don't lead the next generation off dealing with the same stuff and not breaking that cycle.
Right. Can I make a quick suggestion to you, Maleata? Because you said something that really hit home and was like personal for me when you talked about the trauma anniversaries. Because I have them all over the place, but the one in particular that you talked about was a sexual assault. I've also been through that, so I get the trauma anniversary thing. But allow yourself to be in it that day.
Yep.
But then that very next day, make that your survival anniversary.
Yes.
It'll make you feel better about when you know that day is coming up, or when you wake up and you see that that's the date. Oh, I'm depressed. I might be laying in the bed. I might even cry because this happened to me on that day, but I didn't die and it didn't break me. And even if I was depressed the day after I was sexually assaulted, I still lived.
It was survival.
I survived it. So whatever that date is that happened to you, May whatever, make sure that next day, May whatever that is, or June whatever, that's your survival date. And it'll make you feel a little bit more at ease about that trauma anniversary day coming up. I promise you it works, because I had to make that up for me. Like, all right, I went through it, but I survived it. I'm nobody's victim. I was a victim the day that it happened, but the day I woke up the next day, I was a survivor.
Right.
You victimized me that day, but I survived it.
Right.
It didn't kill me. You didn't break me. Because the fact that you're even able to talk about it and say that it happened lets you know you're getting past it. So be patient with yourself. And it's just like, it happened. Okay. Yeah, you did that. I win though. 'Cause you didn't break me.
Okay. That's real. I thank you for saying that, because I think a lot of people, especially in conversations around sexual assault, right? Like the stat at one point was like 1 in 3 women, and I'm like, I'm sitting here. There's 4 of us here, and we're all survivors of different kinds of sexual assault.
So we're
There's
the 1
4
in
of us
3,
here, right? And so like the 1 in 3 stat, that's
It's more
at
like
least-
9.5 and 10.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
It's a very old stat, but I also think it was around women of a certain age, women certain class standing, educational, whatever, right? Because when people give you statistics, when they ask for data, they got to talk about the data pool. But I bet if we just did a casual, blind, like press, click here, anonymous survey on the web or something, it probably skew more with younger people, with Black people, with people who are
And
disabled,
people who've been experiencing it multiple times.
Right, people who've experienced multiple times, and people who have mental illnesses or other neurodivergent. Somebody who, it is a known fact that somebody who has schizophrenia is more likely to be the victim of a violent crime than they are to commit a violent crime. The assumption, and I'm about to bring Jordan Neely into this because I know that was on the show docket, there is a very unlikely possibility that someone who's hallucinating to the extent that we imagine they are, right? Like when somebody's having a psychotic break and they see spiders, or they see their mama, or they think they're in the desert, but they're really on a subway platform, whatever the case may be, they are very unlikely to be violent. They're very unlikely to be violent.
They're scared.
They're scared. Their brain has taken them someplace that they can't get out of. So when we talk about homeless people on the train, first of all, being homeless on the train is not a crime. Being Black and homeless, being loud, being upset, being aggressive. Jordan Neely did not accost the man who choked him. I don't care what he did. The train, I used to live in New York. I know Broadway Lafayette Station. It's a very popular transfer point. At no point did somebody decide to put him off the train. At no point did somebody decide to remove themselves from the subway car so that they didn't have to deal with him. And I say this as somebody who grew up in Philly in the crack era, spent a lot of my teens and 20s and 30s in New York, both as a resident and a visitor. Old New York and old Philly knew how to mind their business. If somebody was snapping out, as long as they didn't hurt anybody, you let them snap out. You just let them have their moment, because it's not your call to make. But most importantly, to intervene to harm them, to okay, you put him in a headlock. The lawyer was like, he didn't mean to kill him. Okay, so what you was trying to do, tickle him? So you was tickling him for 15 minutes?
Right.
And so as somebody who has a mental health disorder, I have a mood disorder. It's never happened for me, but it is not impossible that at some point I could have a mental break with psychotic features. There are kinds of depression that are prone to psychotic breaks. That is frightening by itself, to know that can happen to you or someone you love. So what happens when you're having that crisis in public? Somebody's going to videotape it because it's funny. Somebody else is going to videotape it because they think you deserve to be dehumanized. Somebody else is going to put their hands on you. And then 2 other passengers on the subway are going to hold your legs down. Like, we are not dealing with an idea of mental illness where it is something that people experience. It's almost as if the narrative is that the person deserves to be mentally ill. This homeless guy did not deserve to take up space. He was mad. He said, I'm fed up, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I have needs. He witnessed his mother being murdered when he was 14 years old. That broke him. And no matter what his family did or didn't do for him, there was something in him that was not able to be resilient. And he shouldn't have had to be, because we talk about strength, Black people and strength. Black people, it's also a strength to be soft. It's also a strength to know when you need to rest. And he didn't have what he needed. And to know that I very likely partied with him at a Brooklyn Loves Michael Jackson party, summer 2010, the year after Michael Jackson died. All of New York was partying on his behalf on his death anniversary and his birthday. And to know that I very likely saw Jordan Neely on the train. He might have been one of the kids dressed up, like the Scarecrow at a screening of The Wiz. Like, knowing that we orbited the same city, the same stuff, the same experiences, and to be like, wow, if I had a breakdown when I was couch surfing in New York, or when I wasn't sure I could find housing in New York, what would somebody have done to me? Not for me, to me. And we don't have these conversations because the stigma is that you somehow deserve whatever happens to you for being mentally ill, the same way you somehow deserve whatever happens to you for being Black and being loud or whatever. Whatever negative aspersion somebody makes, whatever negative thing somebody casts upon you, they decided that's okay for them to dehumanize you. And that's part of the reason why so many of us are afraid to or ashamed to talk about our mental illness in the first place. Because somebody's decided that there's something wrong with you, but there's nothing wrong with us. If it's happened to all of us, it's not just Black people, right? It's not just us in this room. Every human has trauma of some kind. Every human, they could have the most money in the world and can afford the best medications, the finest doctors, all the experimental treatments. It won't matter if their mental illness cannot be remedied through those, those practices and those tools. And so when we look at Jordan Neely and his being murdered, the murderer is being charged with 2nd-degree manslaughter. It's probably the best charge, and I say this to somebody who's a student of abolition, it's probably the charge that they're guaranteed to get a conviction for, not the charge that they think he should be charged with. Because if they do 1st-degree murder, it's going to be impossible to prove that. You can't prove that when they didn't know each other. 1st-degree usually means
they prove the intent.
Right. They can't prove the intent, and that's, it just is what it is. But also, somebody's going to be, well, he was a Marine. He might have PTSD. He was 24. He's as old as the Iraq War, damn near. Okay? Like, I'm not going to say he does or doesn't have trauma. I don't know. But I've also seen I'm going down a Reddit rabbit hole, and apparently he was always unnecessarily violent with people. Of course he joined the armed forces because it was socially acceptable. I really am in the mindset that people who have a certain kind of violent bent, whether it's a mental illness or not, whether it's a feature of their mental illness or not, which again is very unlikely that it's a feature of mental illness, much more likely just a feature of entitlement and never having been checked on being terrible to people. We have people who are serial abusers and they never get checked, and sometimes they become president. Sometimes they become mayor. Sometimes they become Marines and choke out homeless Black men on the subway in New York. Like, we cannot let people hijack the conversation about mental health and make it about people like Daniel Penny. It needs to be about people like us in this room. It needs to be about people like Mariah Carey. She talked about having bipolar disorder and being afraid to talk about it. And the reason she went public was because the person who had been threatening her was like, I'm going to go to the tabloid. She said, okay, I got you. Now, this is one of the most famous people on the planet. And she said, yeah, I wasn't sure I wanted to live anymore. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my kids. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my therapist and for, finding a treatment plan that worked. Like, it's not just one type of person. It's all, the type of person who has mental illness is an alive one. You know what I mean? Like, that's just it. And we have to really be willing to talk about it and be honest. It's ugly. It's scary. I have somebody in my life right now who's dealing with alcoholism and he will not get help because he doesn't think he needs help. He's still in the phase of pointing fingers at everybody that ever hurt him, but he doesn't understand how certain people who've hurt him were reacting to what he did to hurt them. He has no self-awareness. And I'm looking at him and I want to support him, but I'm also like, you are not going to cost me my mental health. You can't help everybody either. That's another thing, y'all. You can't help everybody. It is hard to accept, but we cannot help or save everybody. We have to be honest about what our capacity is.
100%. And I actually do like the point that you made about just random people thinking that they can control the narrative of someone else's mental health state. Because I can't tell you how many times, so I am epileptic, and I have been misdiagnosed or misclassified as someone who is schizophrenic, someone who is autistic, just because sometimes I just socially, my brain just shuts down.
Right.
Like I'm physically here, but I'm neurologically unconscious at the moment. Mm-hmm. They call those auras, like it happens. Right. And there was a point in time where mainly throughout elementary school, I missed a lot of that because I was constantly in the hospitals from daily seizures. Mm-hmm. And it would be really, really bad. And people were just like, no, she needs to be like checked into a psychiatric ward. She needs to be psychologically like tested to see what's going on. And I'm like, at that age, of course, I didn't understand it. But there were even times like when my mom passed, I had a seizure behind the wheel. I was not sleeping. I was not eating. I just was trying to figure out how can I just move on with life and readjust. And of course, one of my main triggers is stress. So stress level so high, had a seizure behind the wheel. I just woke up to not even an ambulance being there, but 5 police cars being around my car. And it's not like I crashed into someone. It was in Ardmore. I just stopped in the middle of the street. I was just unconscious. People thought that I was drunk behind the wheel.
You were on drugs. They assumed.
They tried to get me out of the
you're
car.
black and you were in Delco.
They tried to get me out of the car to do, like the walking test. And I'm just like, I'm not consciously here. I can hear you, but I can't even form my lips to respond to you. So they're thinking, oh, something is wrong with her. She's on drugs. She's just drunk right now. We need to charge her with something. And I'm like, no, I can't even physically describe to you what my condition is. But these assumptions that you make are doing nothing but causing harm and potentially probably even cost people their life out in Delaware County because they don't document that stuff publicly.
Right.
So I'm pretty sure there's a lot of other people who have experienced things like that. And for me to be up the street from Lankenau and an ambulance was never called, but I have 5 police cars around me, as I was a black man, I'm pretty sure that narrative would have been very different.
They at least would have tased you.
100%. 100%.
That's crazy.
So it's very concerning when we have people putting in their 2 cents about mental health and what that means, what that should look like to be healthy or to just be mentally aware of your own issues. No. 1, mind your business. 2, is not your place to diagnose me. Your assumptions, you're going off of what your own ideologies are, and they're not even correct. Right. You just want a reason to feel right and your behaviors towards me to be correct or validated. Right. And it's not that case. Yep. So I really did like the point that you made because it happens too often.
It does. Mm-hmm. And then so ableism is, for people who aren't familiar with the term, ableism is discrimination based on somebody's ability, whether it's a physical disability, a cognitive disability, mental illness. So that's I like to call it being neurospicy. Your brain is just different, right? But I also think that the idea of being neurotypical is a myth. It's a white supremacist capitalist myth. The same way there's no such thing as mental illness. There is, right? And so anything that happens to you that has a significant impact on the way your brain functions from there onward is some kind of neurodivergence or some kind of neurospice. It might be a pinch of salt. It might be Tony Secherays. It could be anything. And that's how I like to think about it. But we don't have a social norm around accepting these things. When something gets a diagnosis, and I've noticed this more lately because there are people who are afraid everybody's autistic. It's not that everybody's autistic. It's that the diagnostic tools have changed to be more inclusive. We have a need as a society to treat people better than we have. Like if you've ever read the book Flowers for Algernon, that book would not fly now because it's about somebody being institutionalized and treated poorly for being somewhere on the spectrum. And so like people love to make the connection between mental illness and violence, but they don't make the connection that mentally ill people are often subjected to violence. And that's before we get to, you know, there's that ableist idea, but then there's also anti-blackness. There's misogynoir, which is misogyny directed specifically at Black women, Black feminine people. There's the way that people decide that as Black people, our humanity is always under question. Our humanity is always being questioned. It's not just, oh, well, are you woman enough? Are you man enough? Are you smart enough? Are you this enough? Are you human, period? And that creates a big portion of the epigenetic trauma we experience, and it undergirds the trauma we already have. So if I, in my Black community, am experiencing violence interpersonally from another Black person, I know that I can't go to the cops because more likely than not, one of us is going to get locked up and maybe even murdered by the police. But then what are the community-based responses we have? We don't have them because we are not permitted to build them. We build them, they get knocked down. We build them, they get rooted out. COINTELPRO is still alive and well. You know, we got people who are our own biggest ops because they think that we need to be more like white people. Or they think that we need to be less like the Black people who came before us. Meanwhile, the Black people who came before us, we need to learn from because we're going to repeat what they did if we don't pay attention.
Yep, I agree. So, final takeaways for this evening, or a couple of things that you want to share with the folks who are watching or will watch later in regards to mental health or how they should go about prioritizing their self-care. We'll start with Rasheeda.
Okay, so I'm going to start with self-care because it's so important. And I give myself some type of self-care every day now. And I don't feel guilty about it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be financial because if you can't afford, like I like to shop. That's my thing. Online, in person, up the street, down the street, however I can get it. But sometimes self-care to me is laying in the bed and binge watching whatever show that I want to watch and not answering text messages or picking and choosing who I respond to. That's self-care. Be okay with that and not feel guilty. I had to, people that have children, I definitely want to say this, especially single moms. Once your kids are a certain age, like my two youngest are 9 and 10, so I would feel guilty sometimes, like, oh my God, 3 weekends went by and I didn't do anything for them. That's okay. Maybe 6 weekends go by. Don't put so much guilt on yourself because if you're not okay, you can't be okay for anybody else.
That's right.
So you have to prioritize. Sometimes it's healthy to be selfish. That's what I want the takeaway to be.
Yes.
Sometimes it's healthy to be selfish, and I'm just going to leave it at that.
There you go.
It's mentally healthy to be selfish. That's the one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for that.
I feel like for, well, at least just self-care, just get comfortable and get used to doing stuff by yourself. Like, you don't owe anyone an explanation if you just want to go out to treat yourself to dinner, do an activity by yourself, or just in general. I feel like you can't get to know yourself unless you put time aside to actually spend time with yourself, if that makes sense. So I feel like for self-care, the key word is self. Like, prioritize yourself, do what you want to do, whatever brings you peace or happiness, do it. I take myself out to eat all the time. I'm a foodie, and like Rasheeda said, I like to shop too. So if I want to spend a couple $100, I'm gonna do it. I don't owe anyone an explanation as to why I shouldn't. And if that makes me feel better or it makes me feel at peace, then I'm just gonna rock with it. So that's for self-care, and also for mental health. It's okay to not be okay. Like, it is okay. And it's also okay to just sometimes just open up and have that conversation with someone. Even if you're not looking for a direct response back, just let it out. Let it out, even if you have to write it down. I can't tell you how many times I've been out and I opened up, not even my notes app. I got a whole Google Doc on like my self evaluations or issues that I realize that I want to fix or something. If it comes to mind, write it down, document it wherever you are, and get back to it later. But make sure that you make note of it so you don't continue to suppress it.
Yes.
So definitely just take that with you.
Yes.
For me, actually, Rasheeda, I am one of those moms with the mom guilt. Every trip I've taken has always been like work related or like family vacations. I've had one trip a few years ago for a friend's wedding I went out of the country for, but I recently went on vacation. A couple of friends treated me to vacation in Houston, and I got really anxious the week of the trip because I've been programmed that I became a mom at 18, so my oldest just turned 18. So program like being a young mom, like your life's kind of over, you don't get to do things for you anymore. And I really was guilty about going on vacation for a few days, knowing that I have not been on vacation since way before the pandemic. And it took my friends here and other friends tell me like, yo, your kids are literally like grown, just go have fun. Also, healing and how you care for yourself is different for everybody. No two people's journeys are going to be the same, but do what you feel called to do for yourself. Don't let someone tell you that how you're healing is wrong. I recently, well, not recently, 2 years ago, I shared with close friends and family about the things that I actually went through as a child and a teenager, and the majority of the people had a problem with it. My family is still not talking to me, a lot of them, as a result of me sharing on a Zoom what I've been dealing with and why I was the way I was. And it's because they, you know, especially Black church folks, always want to talk about breaking generational curses, but when you start doing the work, everybody got a problem with it because it doesn't come in this cute little box wrapped with a bow and how they expect it to be.
That's the curse that gives them power and makes them think they're better than everybody. Don't break that curse.
So however you feel called to go about your healing, do it. Do what you feel is best for you. Don't let nobody tell you different. And if they do, there might be people you need to cut off.
Well, I feel like I can sum up or speak to something that each of you has already said. I'm going to try to work backwards. Know the difference between healing and just yelling at niggas. Okay? Because you're if you feel like you can only get healed if you curse out somebody who hurts you, I strongly recommend you do that with a letter that you never send them, or you say it out loud to the wall, you put it into the ether. Because if you actually think that yelling at somebody is going to heal you, you do not understand how healing works. What Diamond said about, you know, don't tell me I can't spend money on myself. I will say this: if spending money to make yourself feel better isn't working, that's because it's not working, and you need to pay attention to that. And it is mentally healthy to be selfish, and I don't mean to hoard or to limit things or to lord access to resources over people. I mean, think about you first, especially people who've been in coercive control and other abusive situations. We have this really bad outgrowth of that experience. I'm not going to call it a habit. It's an outgrowth of that experience. It's something that gets programmed into us where we say yes to please the person who's harmed us. And then one day we don't realize that we don't have to say yes to everybody else just because they asked us, because we're trying to stay out of trouble or stay off their radar and not get yelled at or whatever. We have an opportunity as a society, as a collective, as individuals as well, in our communities, families, group chat, whatever, to transform the way we treat ourselves and others. And that is a big part for me of how I've been able to take care of myself when I'm not in therapy, because the most important work I do is not in that 50-minute session every 2 weeks. There was a point where I was in therapy twice a week for 3 months, and now I'm once every 2 weeks. That means that I've grown, but it also means that I'm applying the lessons and tools. And when something doesn't work, I'm back to the drawing board. I have a toolkit. Like if like when you play maybe like Legend of Zelda or some other game and you like have this pouch with your resources in it, and there's like a crystal and a flute and a this and a that. I have this toolkit that I can use, and I'm always putting new things in it taking old things out of it. That's the most important thing I want to impart on folks. Build your toolkit. Your treatment plan is something that can be done with you and a therapist, but your toolkit is something you can grow on your own. Books from people who actually know what they're talking about. Please, God, y'all, please. And if you want to follow me on socials, I can explain more. There are podcasts that are very insightful. There are audiobooks that can help you. Just seek the information because it's there, but also make connections with people who have a similar idea about what it looks like when you take care of yourself and transform from who you used to be. Because who you used to be is who's with you now. They're who got you here, but you get to take care of them and lay some version of that person, of your past self, to rest. You get to thank them for what they did, because a lot of that was about survival, but now we're doing something different. We are thriving. We're experiencing pleasure. We're living a fuller life. So you thank survival self for getting you here, and you lay them to rest. You don't have to have a funeral, but you retire them. You retire them like a jersey. Or if I have a friend who taught me to envision all my past selves living in a house together. And sometimes I need to call on 27-year-old Lenée to deal with some stuff. And then 35-year-old Lenée takes over. And now 42-and-a-half-year-old Lenée is like, I got this. Mm-hmm. Thank y'all for your input and your information. Thank you for your service. But I got it. I'm in the driver's seat now. And I think that's something we can all do as long as we put put your first foot forward. Make that first step to take care of yourself in that way.
So speaking of socials, how can people get in touch with the two of you, follow you guys, see what you're up to?
I am Dope Girl Fresh on Twitter and Instagram. All one word, all lowercase. No periods, no underscores. DOPEGIRLFRESH. My website is sayheylenee.com. SAYHEYLENEE.com. In June, I have a Grief 101 workshop coming up on June 13th. I've also been offering free grief support spaces for Black folks because June is Pride Month, and it's also the anniversary of the Pulse club shooting. I'm thinking about doing something special for my trans and queer community, because nobody heals alone, nobody suffers alone. And when I say I'm centering a group of people in a space, it doesn't mean others aren't welcome. It means that the group I name is the priority. And so I welcome you all to include me in your grief journey. Thank you.
And Rasheeda?
Well, on social media, I am Stand What You Do, and it's not just the IG handle, it's a lifestyle for me. So it's STANDWHAT_UDO, Stand What _you do. And anything else that you would like to know about my work that's not posted on my social media page, which is open, you can just Google me, or you can just put my name in, Rasheeda Bagwell, from Your Arts Restorative Justice Department, and a bunch of stuff will pop up. Or DM me. I'm definitely somebody that you can slide in the DM. It depends on what you say.
Right.
The reaction you'll get back.
Welcome.
But you can ask. You're more than welcome to ask. And
Yes.
I'm going to answer you back. But it's your energy that's going to lead it.
I hear you. And
There you go. That's a word. That is a word.
Speaking of June and Pride Month, next month's episode will be the Pride edition.
Yes.
Diamond and I are part of a phenomenal team that are bringing to Delaware County the inaugural Delaware County Pride Parade and Festival. The parade is happening on June 3rd in Media, and the festival is happening June 10th in Upper Darby. For more information, y'all can go to udtj.org/Delco Pride. We're still looking for some volunteers.
Don't look over
If
here.
you wanna join us in the parade, I am the parade coordinator, so feel free to sign up on our website, and we hope y'all all come out and have fun with us.
Yes, I'm excited. Again, I'm glad we had this mental health talk, because we've been going through it with the Pride coordinating, but We're going to make it happen. So I'm excited. And thank you, Lenée and Rasheeda, for coming on.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that we were able to have this conversation. And I know that someone out there was touched by things that you all have said. So I'm just glad that just with this space, even though it's a temporary space where we had this conversation, that someone actually benefited from it. And that's the whole purpose of this platform. We're not just talking to talk, but we actually want to service the community in some way. So again, I thank you guys so much for coming on, and I'm looking forward to us all staying connected. And so thank y'all for joining us tonight for What's News Delco. I'm your host, Diamond.
And I'm Lee with the T.
And we'll see you next month with Pride. Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Thank you.